ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Blue Podcast for Golden Show number 2. Actually, well, part 2 out of 3 parts. This time I do have George back with me. Obviously, we have Ben with me for the preview of the games that are taking place at the weekend, and George will be joining me for review. Review. Yeah, so I'm getting my English here. Review of the games that took place. So we're going to be talking about Saturday, Friday night, Saturday games today, and then George will be joining me later on to talk about the games. Obviously, includes our two clubs, Manchester United and Chelsea. So, George, how are you doing?
Very well, Josh. Thank you for having me as always, and really glad to be back. In the hot seat, so to speak, and really looking forward to it as always. So, thank you.
So let's start off with Friday night fixture between Newcastle and Leeds United, 1-1 between the two teams. A lot of shots in this game. Newcastle 14 shots in total, 7 even split with 7 on target, 7 off target. Leeds United 9 shots on target, 7 off target. Game ended 1 each. If you were both teams in this, probably very disappointed with a draw. Both of these teams desperately need to win. But I have to say, St. Maximan probably should be playing for someone better than Newcastle, but the defending for that goal at least conceded really bad. What did you make of it?
Yeah, as you said, it was a really closely fought game, but ultimately, both sides again, desperately, as you sort of said. I mean, even it was sort of only a few weeks in now as we sort of look at it and review it, and both of those teams desperately needed a point, desperately needed all three, I should say. Because it's looking quite hectic down there at the bottom of the table, and obviously I've said this before, but I think it's more conclusively now, which obviously will go into other games as well. But obviously I recall saying all three of the promoted teams I thought would go down, but it looks like again we're going to get on to Brentford, but it looks like that might have been slightly misleading on my part of or it might have been an error thinking that they were going to go down. So there is a third spot, I feel like, other than Watford and Norwich, which both those teams want to try and avoid. But again, as you spoke about, I mean, St. Maximin is such an incredible player, so skillful and potent as well. And Newcastle already do want to keep hold of him, but as you've also alluded to, probably should be playing for a better side, and eventually, probably will move on, which will be a big heartache, I'm sure, for the Newcastle fans who no doubt adore him. But close game, and ultimately, point shared, but there's plenty more games ahead. I think that's what they've got to say for themselves. And I think honestly, even reviewing that, but also the seasons they've had so far, I do feel like both of those teams will be safe when it comes to final knockings in May.
That's right. Do you think this is second season syndrome for Leeds? Do you think they've been figured out a lot more than defensively they were quite obviously bat open last season, but do you think this season they've been more figured out and more teams know how to expose them and deal with their attacking capabilities?
It's difficult to say with full certainty at this juncture, just simply because we have only had a few weeks, and obviously even then we've had that international break, which I'm sure most people who are watching are not big fans of, like I am. So there hasn't been too much actual club football to gain full assurances on what will happen. But as it stands, obviously Leeds have had a few tricky matches to start the season with. But it does seem like with Leeds, they only tend to play one way, and that way can be, as you sort of said, the second season syndrome. I think that is something that can then be exploited. We've seen with Sheffield United as well in recent times. We've seen how bad, how the difference in fortunes once other teams have figured out your tactics, your personnel, because it's very different when you're playing an opponent who you know. Inside and out, and that's why you sort of see so many teams having similar sort of results. And I think it could be the case for Leeds, but I think overall they probably will still have enough quality to do reasonably well in the Premier League. But maybe my initial calculations or prior predictions to the season starting, when I had them sort of upper mid-table sort of place, maybe that might be slightly optimistic, and they might find themselves a few places down on that. But obviously, again, like I said, all the things are relatively fluid at the moment, because I think maybe once it gets to that sort of busy festive period that we see every single year, that's when you really see points going thick and fast either to each different club, and that's when you get a real sort of, I think with the table especially, you get a real sense of where you're going to finish. I think at the moment it's quite easy because the games are not so packed up or packed together. It's relatively easy for teams to try and play their best teams, but it's when those matches do start to pile up and when injuries also as well start to pile up that you really get a sense of the quality and depth of squad. So yeah, as I said, it's difficult to say at the moment, but I think Leeds will be okay. If any Leeds fans are watching, I think you'll be okay. You definitely won't get relegated, but maybe you won't have as good a season as you had last one because, as Josh has mentioned, once you know an opponent and you know their tactics, and if they aren't prepared to change, which I don't necessarily think Bielsa will. I think he's got a philosophy and he'll stick with it no matter what. You can find yourself in big trouble because the ultimate thing in any sport is you have to be adaptable and flexible to try and garner points.
Moving on to the half 12 kickoff on Saturday. A bit of a result that did surprise me. Brentford beating Wolves 2-0 at Molineux. Ivan Toney scored a penalty in the 20th minute, and then 4 minutes later, Brian Mambadou scored in the 34th minute. Ivan Toney assist. Brentford then go down to 10 men as Shantan Baptiste got a second yellow card within 4 minutes to send him down to 10 men. But they see out the result and come out 2-0 winners away from home. They remain. They've only actually lost one game this season. It's 8 points from 5 games, which is incredible. What a result for Brentford! Incredible result.
That really has. I mean, again, I sort of did mention it briefly when I was talking about the other match in terms of like relegation candidates, but I did have. It seems at the moment, in a way, foolishly, I did have Brentford being relegated in an 18th spot. That does seem at this present moment. That does seem again rather foolish. And it appears I will be wrong, but again, there is plenty of the season left to go. But Brentford have been a breath of fresh air, I think, in the Premier League. I think they've come up, and there does tend to be, there always does tend to be, I feel like, one club who exceeds expectations of the promoted clubs, I think, in their first season up. And I think Brentford are certainly doing so currently. Obviously, in Ivan Toney, they've got a phenomenal striker. He did, superbly well, as any sort of ardent football fan will know, in the Championship last season, and he's followed that up with some, exceptional performances in the Premier League. None more so than obviously the game against Wolves, with as you spoke about, a goal and an assist, and I think he also had obviously 2 goals disallowed as well. So he really was in and amongst it. From a Brentford perspective, phenomenal result. Every point counts. I think their first priority, like all the promoted teams, will be to gain 40 points, which is sort of that estimated total that you need to ensure survival. So that'll be the first goal that they've got, and then obviously the sky's the limit once they've reached that. I think you said 8 points, I believe, now after 5 games, which is, if they keep up that relative return, they will get, definitely by maybe sort of February time, they will be safe. But again, you've got all that festive period, and maybe their squad won't necessarily be as deep as it needs to be. So there are sterner tests yet to come, both in terms of scheduling and also, I feel like, in terms of opposition. But yeah, excellent result for Brentford. And then moving on to Wolves, of course. I think Wolves have had some good performances so far this season, but their main issue, as we all know, has been lack of finishing, lack of cutting edge. And again, that is the case again against Brentford. Neves, in particular, had quite a poor game by all accounts. And I feel like Wolves, they do need to. Obviously, it was a bit of a shock that Brentford did win, but at the same time, it feels like with Wolves, they are lacking potency up front, and that can be that they need to find that fast, because ultimately, as I've said many times before, obviously almost in a Michael Owen fashion, goals win matches. And ultimately, in order to survive and in order to win matches and progress up the table and gain points, you do need to score goals. And with Wolves, they are lacking that at the moment. Hardly scored at all this season, or even obviously with the not scoring again against Brentford. And from a Manchester United perspective, against us, they had quite a lot of chances that were created, but none taken. So Wolves are missing that ruthless finisher, that goal scorer, which Brentford do have in Ivan Toney. So the longer that Toney can keep up his excellent form and imperious fashion, the greater Brentford's chances will be initially of survival, and then secondarily, and of finishing in a good place within the league this season, which I'm hopeful they can, because I think of all the 3 promoted teams, Brentford I am a bigger fan of than I am of the other 2, and hope that they do and manage to stay up.
Moving on to Turf Moor, Arsenal beating Burnley 1-0. This is actually quite an even game. Burnley just edged it in the shot, 10% less possession than Arsenal, but the thing that's incredible, Burnley had 48 crosses compared to Arsenal's 13. Probably a draw here would have been fair, but it's a big win for Arsenal in the end. But if you're Burnley, you'd probably be looking like you should at least get a point out of this game.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, any team now that plays, I mean, I know we probably do get a lot of Arsenal fans, because I know it is a very well supported club, but ultimately, a couple of good wins on the bounce now for Arsenal against Norwich and against Burnley. Seeing them propelled up the table, but it's a difficult one really with that, because I feel like for Burnley. And again, this almost feels like throwing shade at Arsenal, but I feel like Arsenal are quite an easy team to play against now. I feel like they haven't got necessarily the quality that they should have. So you do want to see, do want to try and gain points as much as you can against lesser teams, which I think Arsenal will be, or should be classified as, because I feel like they've got a real lack of cutting edge, a bit like what I've said about with Wolves. Definitely not free scoring in any regard. I've spoken already previously about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who has almost fallen off a cliff. I'm aware there were personal reasons for that, but they badly need him to regain goal-scoring form, because a couple of goals so far this season, one apiece. You can't rely on that defence, certainly not against better opposition than Burnley and Norwich. You can't rely on them not to keep a clean sheet, which is what you're going to need if you're only scoring 1 goal a game in order to gain wins, obviously. But yeah, from a Burnley perspective, that's a game you want to look on at least as a point not gained, because you need that point. And really, to be honest with you, I was predicting a Burnley win. So
I said 1-0 Burnley too. So I was with you. Should Burnley fans be worried? 1 point after 5 games, -6 goal difference, or do you think they'll just hit their normal patch of form, go 6 games unbeaten and be okay?
They could, this could be the final year. I know, certain people want them to go down, but this could be the year that they actually do. But in my experience with Burnley, they're that team that's just almost like a cockroach in a nuclear war. They'll still survive somehow. So I think that's what's probably going to happen. Is Burnley will eventually, and as I said, the season's still. I know you've said obviously about the a few games that have passed by, but we are still in the very early stages of the season, so it's too early rather to make any definitive predictions. But I feel like Burnley will do their usual thing, which is start grinding out results from nowhere to get them the necessary points. But there has got to be. Again, it's. I have said that it's too early to predict things with absolute certainty, but I feel like Watford and Norwich are going down. Or remains to be seen whether that'll be the case. I might be proved wrong again on that, but I feel like those two are definitely going down, and there has to be a third team in there. And with Brentford doing so well at the moment, Burnley could slip into that relegation zone, because we all know that they tend to finish just above that relegation zone. So it's going to be difficult, but my gut feeling is that Burnley will still survive, but again, it will be something like a 17th, 16th, 15th, somewhere in that region as a finish for them.
Liverpool beating Crystal Palace 3-0 at Anfield, very straightforward game. Obviously, a new debut for Liverpool, Keontae from what's it called, RB Leipzig, who they signed in the summer. He signed Mal Salah getting on the score sheets. Very straightforward game. Can't really look too much. You expect Liverpool to win this game. Can't really look into too much of your Crystal Palace, can you?
No, I mean, I think Liverpool are. I don't want to say this, but they are starting to pick up momentum again. Obviously, watched their Champions League match midweek, which they were very, very impressive in that match. So I think Liverpool are starting to gain momentum, and they could be. I mean, I didn't say they were not out of the title race when I made initial predictions and placed them fourth, because I do feel like any of the big four sides can win the Premier League, but I feel like Liverpool are picking up points very well. But that's of course because they've got all their Premier players fit. They'll be hoping, obviously their supporters and the club itself will be hoping that they do keep them fit, because although they have reinforced and bolstered the squad with, for example, the man you mentioned, Conor from Leipzig, which was their summer signing, I still feel like there is, once you get past that initial first 11, I still feel like there is a drop off which you don't necessarily get as much when you go through the other three teams in the big four. So I still feel like when the season really gets going, and again the games start coming thick and fast, I feel like Liverpool will struggle again, as long as unless they can keep everyone absolutely fit and in tip-top shape. And that's what Liverpool fans have to pray for, because there was a disgusting lack of, obviously you can sort of laugh as I do as a Manchester United fan about the lack of investment that Liverpool had in the summer compared to the other three sides in the big four. But I feel like their owners don't really care as much as they did a few years ago when they were shelling out massive money for Van Dijk and Alisson. And I feel like that, unfortunately, money, it's a pay-to-win sport, football, in many ways. And I feel like Liverpool's owners don't have that same appetite to pay to win, and that is going to have an on-field effect, knock-on as well. But Liverpool they're sort of a bit like a revel, really. You never know what to expect with them, but they should be still in and amongst it, when the season's finished. But as you said, for Palace fans, they don't need to necessarily worry. Liverpool will beat plenty of teams this season. It's not a big deal. Obviously, they've already got their stunning win, and we obviously against Spurs as well to look back on with massive fondness. So Palace are going to be all right. And also, I would say that I did think that Palace initially, with Patrick Vieira, the lack of experience there, I did feel like he was going to be potentially one of the managers that would get sacked quite soon in the season. I feel like they are still picking up points here and there, obviously again with the win against Spurs. So he looks like he'll be safe for another few months, and so will Palace. But as I said, there is going to be a third. Again, we're sort of speaking about all these different teams that could be the third team that go down, with Norwich and Watford and Palace. I still do believe are one of those teams that could have a bad upturn of form and therefore be one of the teams that gets drawn into that relegation dogfight.
Fair enough. Moving on to the Etihad Stadium, Manchester City held goalless by the visiting Southampton. Manchester City, and this is no joke, registered one shot on target against the team that, paper defensively don't have the greatest of team. Oh my God, George, City were bad. They were bad.
I think it was probably to do with the fact that they hadn't got any fans. I thought that was.
Oh yeah.
I think that was. Again, sort of just briefly, because I know we have lots of guys that watch and like to hear different football news, from this sort of general podcast. Pep Guardiola's comments during the week were quite funny from a rival's perspective regarding fans. I mean, it is unbelievable when you sort of see. I think also as well when I think the ticket prices are quite low for Manchester City compared to
the Leipzig game. They were on sale for £12.50.
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah, there was all sort of like, because I get lots of like football things through and stuff like that. And she said, yeah, £12.50 for a for a ticket.
For a Champions League game.
Yeah. But what I also found funny was I can't remember the name. And obviously, Manchester City fans will have to forgive me here, but I can't remember what the name is of the guy that they got to speak on behalf of the supporters. But he, spoke about it and said, Pep Guardiola should, out of his massive salary of $300,000 a week, which was estimated, he should pay for all the different kids and stuff to go. But also within that whole spiel was a bit where he said, with these group games, they're a bit boring because nobody really cares. It was something like along those lines. And I thought, this is what happens, unfortunately, with, when you have a club that is grown too quickly, artificially, through foul means, should we say. you have this massive dearth of support which they can't really get around, and obviously Pep and feeding into that the empty had meme perfectly. I just thought that was quite funny. But back to the specific game, with the Southampton one. Again, I sort of mentioned that because of the the fans who he was trying to get to attend in greater volume. Man City really were absolutely terrible. I mean, as you said, obviously, I think it was Phil Foden who had the one shot on target, which was in the 90th minute. They were just, I mean, what I would say though, from a Manchester United, again, obviously watching the game, which I did when we drew against them ourselves with the 1-1. Southampton, although they don't have necessarily the best defensive record, I feel like they are quite good they are very well drilled by Ralph Hasenhüttl. And again, that's something that City found to their cost as well. If they throw out a blanket, it's very difficult to break them down. So, I mean, it's a couple of points dropped again for Manchester City, and already, these are sort of points that if someone can string together a very good run, whether that's Liverpool, Chelsea, or Manchester United, we all want to see the back of Man City, and get enough points ahead of them so that when they really start moving, which normally happens sort of like winter time, when Man City's engine starts to really go into overdrive, a club needs to be quite far ahead of them to ensure that if they do drop points, because that is, that has always been Manchester City's greatest strength, is that, ginormous squad that they've got. And that's what happens, when those matches that I've spoken about a few times already, when they do start coming in really quickly one after another, that's when the best squad, the one that's able to rotate, that's when that team motors ahead. And that's what Pep Guardiola's got as a massive advantage for himself. It's a couple of points dropped for Man City. Good point gained for Southampton, because that's not necessarily one they've expected to get on the road. And Man City, hopefully this is the first of many drop points, because I really don't want to see them champions again, because we've had it far too often over the last few years.
If you were just very brief on Southampton, obviously all questions over Southampton. Would they go with this? Where would they do? But if you, I think it's safe to say, if you're a Southampton fan, you should be worried about relegation. You'll not be probably top half of the table, but you'll pick up some good wins. You'll be competitive. So I think and Hasenhüttl's obviously still very much the man for Southampton. On the Car Road, Watford beat to Norwich 3-1. I'm going to keep this as simple as that, and excuse my language to everyone. Norwich are fucked. If you're conceding 3 goals at home to Watford, I don't see him going to say it now. I generally think they actually might finish with less points than that Derby City team. They're looking atrociously bad.
Yeah, I know obviously that again, maybe some watchers of the Blue podcast will be aware that Reese, who myself and Josh know from the Dugout Football channel, he had predicted initially what Josh had said at the very start of the season, that they would finish with fewer points than Derby, who famously have finished with the fewest amount of points in Premier League history. And at the time, it is, records do have to be broken, but that's definitely an unwanted one by Norwich and any other club. But at the moment, they can't, as you sort of said. I mean, Watford, ultimately the other team I believe are certainly going to be relegated. And if you're losing to them at home, and I think Norwich are just, as you said, I mean, I don't want to sort of swear again, because we might get, we might have younger viewers watching, but they are, unfortunately, they're in, and again, we might have Norwich fans, but I would say they are a bit of an embarrassment at the moment. Losing to absolutely everyone. I know obviously they were unlucky against Leicester, but I feel like Norwich. I feel like, I mean, obviously you've now agreed with Reece in saying that they are going to get fewer points than Derby. I still feel like it's a bit too early to say that definitely, but certainly they're at the moment they are going to. I mean, where are they going to pick up points from? That's the thing. We know. What you would say is there's going to be certain teams that are going to have an off day maybe, and they might be able to capitalise there and get some points but I mean, definitely getting relegated. I think that's, unless they have a dramatic reversal of fortunes, they're definitely getting relegated, because they are the worst team, I think, in the division. That's some points that they needed, they haven't got, and already you're already writing them off. So bad day for Norwich, and for Watford, obviously a good 3 points, but I still feel like you'll get relegated as well. So it's almost a Pyrrhic victory.
Okay, so on to Salford City. They went away to Champion. I'm not going to do this. We'll do this. Okay. They lost 2 to the Champion Rovers. We're not going to do that again.
Damn it.
It's a very bad loss, George. It's a very bad loss for Salford City. It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as a keen Salford City supporter and follower, I'm absolutely disgusted with the loss, and really hope the lads can turn it around next week.
There we go. So Aston Villa literally about half an hour ago beating Everton 3-0. Now Everton were without Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and Jordan Pickford, all due to, I think I could be wrong, but I think it was COVID related. I think I could be wrong, but I think that's what it was. I think it was COVID related issue. I was just going to say, I can't believe I'm going to say it, but Andy Lawgrant was on the bench for Everton. A guy I literally think had 4 or 5 different clubs in the last 3 seasons. Like, no joke. But anyway, Everton. Okay, Everton were suffering from injuries. They were playing players out of position. Their bench wasn't particularly strong. But if you were Everton, you're worried about that squad depth, because that squad depth is horrific. I know, yes, they did have financial fair play issues, which is a big also reason. But if they pick up any injuries throughout the season, it's gonna hurt them. Like, their squad depth is really, really bad.
Yeah, as you said, I mean that was unfortunate that they had so many key players missing, but as you said, the squad depth is truly atrocious with Everton. I feel like they've got, again, it's almost like a theme with the Merseyside clubs, with Liverpool and Everton. I feel like they both are lacking certain squad depth as well. So yeah, I mean, from an Everton perspective, and also for Rafa Benitez, who's the sort of relatively new incumbent of the managerial role, you are hoping against hope that none of those players miss too many games, because ultimately, I feel like with Everton as well, they should be a club that are knocking on that sort of like European spots. A club of the stature of Everton should be somewhere in and around that. But if they, as you said, off with the FFP issues that they did have, but it's not good enough, I think, for a club of Everton's size not to be in the top half of the table at least. But it all remains to be seen whether I feel like they will still be okay. And I believe I predicted them to finish 8th, I think, initially before the season started. So I still do feel like they will get somewhere around that. So whether that's good enough for Benitez and the Everton supporters, I wouldn't presume to know. But yeah, I mean, obviously a great result for Aston Villa. They're still feeling their way into the season as well. A bit of intermittent form for Aston Villa, but a great win for them. And yeah, both of these sides, I still feel like we're somewhere in and around mid-table anyway. So yeah, it's a long season ahead, but both need to keep all their best players fit.
The funny thing is, it only took 5 games for Aston Villa to bin Ashley Young out of the squad completely. They didn't stay for very long. So just 2 things off the Premier League very briefly. First of all, Derby County did beat Stoke City 2-1 today, but they're going to get a 21-point deduction. Sad to say, isn't it? It's really, really sad. Derby, given what they're facing, they're currently 12th in the Championship, 10 points. So far, they're only 3 points above the relegation zone because the Championship's really, really tight, but they're doing okay. It's sad to see, isn't it, that Derby are going to pretty much be faced with relegation.
Or with Wayne Rooney as manager, he's going to start playing, and they're going to go on a mad run up the. Is devastating. I didn't realise, actually. I think from what I read, they probably have changed it and made it slightly more severe. I thought it was fewer points than that. Regardless, though, I think in the Championship, where all the teams are relatively even, and I feel like that with the Championship every single year, it's not necessarily too easy to call who will get promoted, who will get relegated, and so forth, because all the clubs, are much of a muchness. But that amount of points, unfortunately, will be devastating for Derby. They'll almost certainly be relegated because Rooney, for all his amazing playing career, isn't a Sir Alex Ferguson able to conjure some sort of managerial miracle. And yeah, from a sort of like football purist's perspective as well, I feel like Derby County are a very rich club in terms of history. It is just a real sad sight that, again, one of those famous football clubs is in such financial peril, and again, of course, will be in footballing peril themselves as well, because they'll almost certainly be relegated. So yes, very sad story for everyone concerned with Derby County.
And the final thing we have to talk about: Manchester United losing the young boys out of the Champions League. We can do this because this will be out before the West Ham game, so we can count this as a preview. Yes. I'm sure you were fuming with that result. For a lot of reasons, for Lingard's lack of concentration in crucial moments, sole source subs and game management, probably Wan-Bissaka again sent off stupidly. Do you put it down to maybe young boys just wanted it more and that's why they got the result in the end? Or do you think Solskjaer takes the blame for a very questionable subs and game management he showed throughout that game?
It's difficult to get an exact answer to that, but I mean, from start to finish, really, it was a shit show, that entire match. I feel like we started incredibly slowly against young boys. There wasn't any sort of technical play or build-up. Ultimately, I think we only had two, and if we're taking the entire game into consideration, only 2 shots on target. Superb through ball by Bruno Fernandes and a great finish by Cristiano Ronaldo. But other than that, we didn't necessarily threaten. Then Aaron Wan-Bissaka takes an incredibly poor touch, gets away from him, puts his foot up, and goes through a player. The player howls and goes around like he's been shot, as they often do, unfortunately, and he gets sent off. What I would say just on that, in a brief sort of aside in regards to that foul, yes, it was a red card by the letter of the law, and I fully agree that it should have been given as a red card. Even as a Manchester United fan, I think that's correct. But there was also another match in the Europa League. I think it was the Leicester game. I can't remember exactly which match it was, but there was the exact same tackle, and it was a yellow card was given. So it just shows that there's no consistency in football. I feel like both should have been red cards. The other challenge I'm mentioning, I know a lot of people again who watch this will know which other challenge I'm talking about, but it was a red card. Silly thing for Wan-Bissaka to do. Wasn't any malice involved in it, but just a terrible decision for Wan-Bissaka to go in like that and deservedly get sent off. But after that, in steps Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, calling the men back as though we were playing prime Barcelona. All men back behind the ball, disgusting defensive, abhorrent tactics, yet again. As I said, treating young boys instead of, I don't really want to say this, but I will anyway, like the Swiss farmers that they are. he decides to cower in an incredibly cowardly and pragmatic mode, which I've often accused Ole Gunnar Solskjaer of being a coward. And he's proved that on multiple occasions as the manager of Manchester United. He decides to make very, very defensive and, as you said, questionable substitutions. I do feel like Ronaldo should have gone off, because I felt like when we were chasing the game, I felt like he didn't really offer anything. He did have that opportunity, of course, which could have been a penalty. Obviously, it wasn't, because it was a bit soft. But other than that, I felt like he wasn't the willing runner that you need when you have 10 men. I felt like, obviously you'll know as well, when Lukaku was playing against Liverpool, when you guys had 10 men, I felt like Lukaku did a much better job of holding up the ball than Ronaldo did. And I feel like that was a lack of application from Ronaldo. And I know a lot of people again will sort of wonder why I'm questioning Ronaldo, and I am one of Ronaldo's biggest fans. So I'm just sort of seeing the game as I say it. And as I said, I felt like he offered very little up front, so I would have taken him off, but I probably would have brought on Martial a lot sooner. Because I feel like one of Martial's strengths is that he can hold up the ball very well, and he's also good at winning free kicks, and and that would have wasted a bit of time and got us up further up the field. And as I said, I feel like Ronaldo was a bit of a passenger once we went down to 10 men, other than the moment I've already alluded to. But then, some of the other substitutions, taking off Donny van de Beek at half time to bring, and obviously keeping on Fred. Long-time viewers of this channel will know what I feel about Fred, so I don't necessarily need to go in too much on him. Other than to say that in the sort of intervening weeks since we did the last Golden Show, he's been absolutely atrocious, and exactly what I've been talking about for years, and trying to pack him off on a one-way ticket back to Brazil. But yeah, it was just absolutely terrible defending. Again, obviously on the first goal, just to talk about that, atrocious defending from Luke Shaw. I've no idea why he was tucked in at that point. Didn't get out to the man close fast enough, and obviously, Ollie sort of talked about the fact there was deflection on the cross, and that means that I feel like Maguire and Varane couldn't necessarily do too much about it when it was crossing that fast, and it's it's in that sort of corridor of uncertainty, so to speak. There is very little you can do about it. So they obviously scored there, and then the second goal. I won't go too much in on Lingard because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer chose to keep him and chooses to play him often. And it's not necessarily too much. It is his fault. Obviously, a poor decision. He had about 5 different options to choose from when he had that ball. If you sort of freeze it, when he had the ball with his back to obviously about to pass it, he had about 5 different options that he could have chosen. He chooses literally the only option that's going to lead to a goal, which with a very, very poor pass. And I think that does show a bit of Lingard's lack of astuteness and football intelligence. And I'm a big one for football intelligence and players, and that's one of the reasons why Lingard has been a bit part on or not used as much for the last few years. And obviously he had his loan to West Ham, but he doesn't pick himself. Ollie does that. And we walk away with a disgusting loss. Full credit to young boys. I mean, great win for them. They deserved it. They were the only team that showed any aspirations of winning that match. But yeah, in sort of summation, I just felt like incredibly negative tactics from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, deciding to play a back 5, deciding to resort to a back 5. But I think Varane coming on was a good decision, but I would have probably taken off Lindelof, who again is another player, again, that long-time viewers will know that I don't really rate whatsoever. But yeah, he went to a back 5 and just invited on waves and waves of pressure. None of our players seem to, and this is what I would say, is that yes, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer makes the terrible substitutions and changes the formation to protect and park the bus against a team that we should be beating even with 10 men. But our players did show a disgusting lack of any threat or ability to stay on the ball and draw players into them. It was almost like one-way traffic, other than the Ronaldo opportunity that could have been a penalty, but again, shouldn't have been because it was incredibly soft. We offered nothing in that match. And so young boys take a deserved win. I'll say that as a United fan. And now what I would say is, in sort of taking the entire group into context, moving forward, is that's another 3 points, a bit like we had last year where we lost in Istanbul. That's another 3 points that we thought we would get 3 points in. And unfortunately, with European football, that could be costly. And it feels like deja vu again, where we're going to be eliminated in the group stages again. And obviously, talking about the wider footballing scenario, every other English team, again, a bit like last season, obviously, when everyone qualified for the quarters and you had yourselves, obviously Chelsea and City fighting out for the final, while Man United were fighting around in a Farmers Europa League. I feel like it's almost like, it's almost going to happen again. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, despite the fact we've reinforced heavily in the summer, bringing in Rafael Varane, arguably the best centre-back in the Premier League, Ronaldo, in my opinion, the greatest player of all time, and Jadon Sancho, a real talented youth player who's done phenomenally well in the Bundesliga. He's had all this investment, but he just doesn't know what to do with it. And the tactics are terrible, and the football is terrible, and we're just going to continue to lose games in embarrassing fashion, because the coaching, in-game tactics, and general approach, managerial position, it's almost like having Ronald McDonald as your manager.
That's a very, very good way of putting it. Just regarding West Ham very quickly, then, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you will be playing West Ham back-to-back here. I'm not
I think so, yeah.
Because you have the league. This is the very exciting goal-ending, thrilling competition called the Carabao Cup. Is next week. You're away from home, I think, aren't you?
Can't remember it now off the top of my head. Let me just check.
I think you're away. I think you're away from home in the league, and then you're at home in the Carabao Cup. If I think that's
right. Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Are you going away to the London Stadium against our Australian West Ham? Would you be happy with a point? Or are you saying after that young voice, Man United must react and must win?
I was, I'm unfortunately I'm a bit, and again, if other Manchester United fans won't necessarily have the same point of view as me, but I'm someone who accepts nothing less than perfection. I feel like that was drilled into us, even in my sort of youth by Roy Keane and Sir Alex Ferguson, is that nothing other than winning matters. Ruthlessness above all. So no, I'm not accepting a draw. They better win. Obviously, both. I want to see us win every single match that we play. And I feel like West Ham, although they are, under David Moyes now, a very good outfit, and certainly are going to be pushing again on that top six, which they did excellently last season. We should be beating them. I know they had a good result in Europe against some more farmers, but obviously what you would say is that we obviously lost to our farmers and they beat their farmers, so they're coming in on slightly more of a roll. Declan Rice as well. Just a small piece on West Ham's European exploits. The way that, again, I do feel like there is a massive bias in the media towards English players in general, because that, when I sort of saw the title, I was like, it's Declan Rice with an amazing solo goal, and then actually watched the solo goal they were talking about. I mean, he did very little on that. He just sort of intercepted it and then sort of started running, or sort of shuffling down the field at rapid rate, and then finished it. It wasn't that is not what I classify as a solo goal, because he hardly had anything to do. But again, sort of BT Sport and the English media in general love to hype up young players who are English. It's again a case of that. I really don't want, again, just on Rice, I really don't want him to come to Manchester United next summer. I know he's our priority player for CDM, but I would be very happy if you guys, obviously Chelsea, another team that might be in for him, I'd be happy if you guys took him, because I feel like he's not, he's not a very technical player, and I want someone who can actually pass a ball, and who actually knows how to dictate a match, which Rice most certainly doesn't. I've watched him so many times for England, obviously, and for West Ham. But yeah, as a United fan, must-win match against West Ham. I mean, Liverpool are now sprinting away with the points on points. We need to go ahead of them again, hopefully, or at least match them up in terms of points. So yeah, I'm expecting nothing less than a win. And also, I want to see a very good performance, please, from the guys. And not only that, but I also want to see no Fred, no Lindelof, and no McTominay. So none of those three playing, please, as well. And I want to see us beat West Ham comfortably. And I also want to see a real change in philosophy from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But in terms of that last thing, in terms of him actually growing some managerial acumen, I don't believe I'll get any such luck until he's eventually fired, which unfortunately again will be in a few years' time, because it's impossible for him not to get top four, which is the only thing the board care about.
That's fair enough. So that brings you into the Golden Shorts. I mean, George will be back roughly sometime early next week to talk about the Sunday games, get reaction to Chelsea, Spurs, West Ham United, and preview all of them. And then we'll do a preview of the Carabao Cup games, which I'm sure we're on the edge of our seat for. At least it's Premier League oppositions. We're getting, so this will be a half decent game. George, Good to have you back. Very, very good to see you. I hope you enjoyed being here.
Yep, excellent. Thank you very much for having me as always, Josh. And obviously, if you guys who are watching are new here, do remember to like, share, and subscribe as well. Looking to grow this wonderful channel and propel us into the future. So thank you very much.
George literally just said everything else I need to say, so I've got nothing else. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.